Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Enterprise Dish. We are hanging out with my man Dux in the DC area. It is, I was going to say early in the morning, but depending, I guess, when people are listening to this podcast, it could be late at night. But how is it going, Dux? How's your 2021 treating you?
Hey, good morning. Happy New Year, everybody. So far, so good. It's what, 22nd of January now?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, time flies.
Time time is flying. We are a little over, I think 5% of the year is now behind us, although we are still in the midst, at least in the northern hemisphere, of the winter. So I'm looking forward to spring. We're 6 to 8 weeks away from slightly warmer weather, so looking forward to that. But we've got some good things to talk about. Even though it is early in 2021, Microsoft has done a couple notable updates. One of them actually impacts me almost, I don't want to say every single day, but a couple times a week. They've updated the OneDrive, or more specifically, just basically the share file size in the Microsoft 365 world to 250 gigabyte limit, which is really good because we send around, at least at our company, some large 3D files or text files or image, not text, but definitely image files that are around 200 gigs, and this makes me quite happy.
Absolutely, this is great. And as much as I would love to use OneDrive every single time, there are instances where I had to use other products like
Mm-hmm.
WeTransfer,
Yep.
sending really large files. So the upload, I think that's going to help a lot of people, and especially now we're using a lot of videos and
Yes.
multimedia type of content.
Yeah, and that's, I think people kind of, I don't want to say gloss over about how big of a deal this is, but when you think, oh, they increased it like 100 gigs or whatever it was, like that's one thing. But you got to remember, there's literally hundreds of millions of people using this, and that sort of file transfer capacity is, like, at that scale, is something I probably can't even imagine in my feeble little brain.
Absolutely.
So another little tidbit here, and this one actually impacts me directly. This is how I learned about it. Is Microsoft is now letting you send Microsoft Teams meetings through a new add-in in Google Calendar. I'm curious if you have any quick thoughts on this, and then I can explain how this one impacts me directly, Dux.
So I got to tell you, Brad, I actually quit using Google Calendar, maybe what, 6 years ago now when
Yeah.
Outlook.com first came out.
Yep.
So I just signed up for Outlook.com because I was able to get an email address that I liked. However, I've never used Google Calendar since. So I really don't know how you schedule meetings in Google Calendar, but I'm sure being able to add Microsoft Teams into it will be really good.
So I still use Google Calendar, and that's what I was going to say how it impacts me, mostly because I have a bunch of shared calendars on there, and it's sort of like when you have a messaging app that all your people use or all your friends
Mm.
use, and then trying to get them to migrate to something else. Like we've got a bunch of shared calendars, and so I've been. We'll talk about this here in a second. You'll see how this links in, the listeners. But I would really just want one calendar to rule them all. And right now I've had to have my Teams calendar over here and my
Mm.
unified calendar over here. And so this extension is going to bring them all together and make my life just a little bit better. So I thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Microsoft, I should say, for
Well, you're
putting
talking
that.
about getting people to migrate, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to convince everybody to use Signal.
Yeah.
It's hard to get people to move away from WhatsApp, but we'll see how that goes.
Yep. I am a bit, I've been using Signal for 3 4 years. It's been a while. I quite like it. I know a lot of people also like Telegram. That's been another sort
Mm.
of app that has absorbed some of the WhatsApp people who have jumped off the Facebook boat or whatever you want to call that. And so, if anybody's out there looking for a unified app solution, I, much like Dux, can highly recommend Signal. It's got your desktop, it's got your mobile, and so it's also got some pretty crazy end-to-end encryption. So it's always a good thing. Other things, Dux, that are coming to Teams. Microsoft, I think we've mentioned this before, but I'd love to know like actually how many people work on Teams because of the rate of stuff that comes out that door is incredible. But PowerPoint presenter view, I know you are a man of the slides, and this has got to be good news for you.
Love it because just like yesterday, I was doing a workshop and I try to be fancy to overcome the limitation.
Yeah.
The challenge I have with Teams when you do PowerPoint sharing or desktop sharing is my video is really small in the
Yep.
corner. So I use fancy tools to make the PowerPoint show or my desktop show along with my video.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is if you record it and you do the spotlight view, the recording doesn't capture the spotlight view. So this is good news with the PowerPoint presenter view coming out where you can have multiple layouts. And I think it's very similar to what they do with Teams live events, where you can have the speaker and the desktop and the presenter or the presentation on the screen at the same time.
Yeah, which actually brings up an interesting question, and I can maybe justify why they have it. But I'm curious if Microsoft would ever actually either build and or acquire the software suite that allows you to do that fancy stuff you're just talking about. Some people use OBS. I personally use XSplit. There's also other tools out there, but it makes you kind of wonder. Like that's another natural progression for where Microsoft could eventually move.
Absolutely. Yeah, I use XSplit as well. And yeah, definitely, I would love all those capabilities built into Teams.
Yep. And for people who aren't familiar, the biggest downside to using those apps is that they have to be running in the background for you to use them. Like I'm actually using XSplit right now, and it has to be running 24/7 on this box. And if you have honestly like a mid or lower end machine, these are pretty resource because it effectively captures all the video, allows you to augment it, and then kicks it back out. And so they're pretty resource intensive, and so they're not going to work on lower end machines. So keep that in mind. But speaking of features, Ducks. Speaking of features, 2021, we've got, we'll just say 11 full months ahead of us, 11 full months and some change. What do you hope? And I'm going to hope, as long as I remember, I should put this on my calendar.
That's right.
By the end of this year, what are any features that you hope are coming to Teams?
You know, I'm really hopeful with a lot of the AI powered capabilities. So, for example, a few years ago, they talked about when you're in a Teams meeting, there's ability for AI driven meeting assistant, right? Where after the meeting is done, somehow this meeting assistant will be able to capture action items, tasks, and be able to assign it right after. I saw a blog post a couple days ago, and I think it's moving around that direction already. So that's cool. Second is the ability for the meetings recording. I know they moved it from Stream for the recording to go to SharePoint, but now it's hard to get to it. Figure that out, and just again an easy way to get back to those recording. Because today it's cumbersome to figure out where those recordings are. And then the last part for Teams, really, I would just say more enhancements around the UI and UX. I know they're doing a lot of great job enhancing some of the UI UX, but continuing that work. And thus far, what I've been seeing, it's like you said, right? It's at a pace that keeps coming, and more features are being introduced.
So you came up with these really great examples compared to what I have. Dux has got like these productivity focused things, some AI stuff. Actually, when you were talking about the AI stuff, I'm like, they better not call that Team syntax, like they call it SharePoint syntax, because they better not call it that, because the Microsoft Word does not like that word, and nor does Grammarly, and it throws up a whole bunch of errors. Anyways, I fully agree that those action items would be really interesting too, and I wonder if there would even be like a stopgap that where you could say like I don't want to say a trigger word, but like it's, we could say Dux is going to call me tomorrow, and then I could just say action or something or whatever, and then it would know to like bing, like that would be the item. I'll be curious to see. Microsoft's got some really smart and people, and they've already got the transcription part and transcribing and transcription down. So now then it's, I guess, just a process of probably analyzing that contextual information.
I mean, along that lines, right? Not to cut you off, but along that, imagine the day would come that suddenly a chatbot would just say, "Hey, Brad, you have a meeting with Docs in, an hour. Do you have everything you need? Maybe you want to read up on all these topics first. In fact, you don't have to read it up. I got it for you here. Just read through these bullet points." Or maybe going into my calendar and say, "Hey, looks like this week," because they're starting doing that with focus time, which is great. But then even looking into it, maybe it's not a good idea to meet with Brad because you have this other meeting with your CEO, which you need to spend more time on. Something like that.
Wow, like So that brings up a lot of like hierarchy of productivity versus meeting time. Like that's an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not easy, right? But it's not even looking at the productivity. Maybe analyze, well, Dux has been chatting and emailing with Brad a whole lot more this week, so maybe this upcoming call is important. Let's reschedule this other one. And you know what I'm talking about? So now it's looking at the 360 view of what you're doing. Oh, he's been working on this document and co-authoring with Brad. So they may be working on some project, right?
Yeah, what I was thinking, and this is right along the same vein. So they have like tasks already right built into Teams. So it could almost be along the lines of like Microsoft, the Microsoft Graph will say, knows that I have X project due January 30th, and I have 2 meetings coming up, and those deadlines aren't until April 15th. And I have another one that is targeting that January 30th date, and it knows based on my tasks how long I am along that journey of getting it done. And maybe it can intelligently be like, look, Brad, you're behind on this project, which that would be really deflating coming from a personal bot. Like, hey, you're missing your deadlines. Like, I know. But it could, proactively say, why don't you bump these out, focus on this so you can hit your deadline. That would be, wow.
Well, now take it further, right? So now certainly you can tap into my analytics, how you spend your time. And then you bring it up to organization analytics, where your manager on a regular basis would get reports on, hey, this month Dux has finished all his proposals on time, send it out. We saw business is coming in faster compared to this other person. And it's not intended to, punish people or reward people, but to analyze and tweak and see not only the type of individual that they should hire perhaps, or what training program or professional development program. So there's a whole world of possibilities.
Be square with me, Dux. Is AvePoint going to launch this next week? Watch. That's going to be next episode. Look what we did since we last talked. We had this magic AI bot that can automatically take all this stuff. Well, there's primarily 2 things that I really want in Teams that would just make my life so much simpler, and they are way down on the complexity list of what you announced. The first one is I really want to be able to change where I can save downloads. Like, that's such a... If you click an item in Teams, it downloads it automatically into your downloads folder. You can't change You can't change the target destination, which I would really love that, because I don't want it to download into my personal downloads folder. I want it to download into our corporate OneDrive folder, because I want to be able to access what I just downloaded on my PC upstairs directly into a known location that's on any device. That is request number 1.
First world problems.
Absolutely. Like I am fully aware that these are the first of the first world problems. The other one is something related to we talked about earlier, is I want to be able to bring in third-party calendars into Teams calendar. Yes. That is a big one. Even if it's just RSS feed read only, that's perfectly fine. Because that's why I'm still on the Google shared calendar, is because I can't ingest those RSS outputs into the Teams calendar. It's its own little island.
I know when I was using Google Calendar, there were issues bringing Google Calendar into Outlook. Have they figured that out?
I don't know, because I don't do it. Like, that's why I use the Google Calendar, because up till now, other than my meetings that are scheduled explicitly with Teams meetings, they all just show up there. And so I'm not trying to break something that has worked for 5-6 years, because I got a lot of, I don't want to say like super important calendars, but there's a lot of timelines in these things that relate to Microsoft stuff and beyond, and I don't want to break them because they're helpful for what I do for a living. So yes. Other things people should put on their calendar, Dux, by the way, because AvePoint is also included in this. We have a SharePoint event. We've got a full day of knowledge, of deep dive sessions from a bunch of Microsoft MVPs and industry experts happening February 9th. It's called Gitted IT SharePoint One Day Extravaganza. It's not called Extravaganza, but I refer to it as that. And that's coming up on February 9th. Dux, you got anything else happening on your side of the podcast?
Absolutely. So this is something sooner along the lines of your event. Next week, I have a webinar with Christian Buckley, another Microsoft Regional Director and MVP who joined us recently, on what Microsoft 365 tools to use when and top collaboration tips. This topic just never dies down, and certainly we'll be more than happy to share best practices. When do I use Teams? When do I use Yammer? When do I use SharePoint? Highly encourage everybody to join and invite your colleagues January 26th. And if for some reason you can't make it, it's going to be available on demand after.
Buckley, I think you just said it too. He just joined you guys, right? I remember seeing that, I think, from his LinkedIn post. I followed him for a while. He's been outputting a lot of good stuff. So that's a big pickup for you guys. That's good. That is really, really good. Well, Dux, it has been another conversation. I'm still optimistic that we're going to be doing one of these in person this year. It's gonna happen. I will drive to DC and we'll do it from AvePoint Studios. I don't really care at this point. I'm itching. Like it's been over a year since I've really gone anywhere.
Hey, seriously, if you want to come down, maybe let's set up outdoor by the Washington Memorial or something. That'll be cool. And do a live session, right?
Yes, this has me thinking. I like it. Well, to everybody else,
we've got the outdoor equipment, so we can make it happen. And maybe have some drones flying. Well, we can't fly drones in DC, so cut that idea.
Yes. Why are Brad and Dux in jail together? Well, they tried to report a podcast with drones, and things went downhill. I'll tell you what, that would be a story worth telling as long as I'm not in jail for more than 48 hours. Otherwise, my wife would kill me. So, all right, everybody else, there's some good links down in the description below. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll catch all of you next time, and hopefully someday in person.